Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the rundown. I just said good morning. It may not be morning when you're watching this, and that's okay.
That's the cool thing about streaming.
Yeah, it's great.
It's where whenever and wherever you want to watch it. We're just glad that you're tuning in wherever and
Yeah.
whenever you're hitting play on this podcast. We want to welcome you to the Rundown podcast of New Life Assembly of God Church in Monticello, Arkansas. My name's Tim Park. As always, this is our co-host, Bethany Hoover. And we have the distinct honor and pleasure of serving New Life Assembly of God Church in several different capacities. And so we're grateful to have the opportunity to be here and have this conversation. We hope you find it valuable. We hope you find it life-giving. We hope that it is another tool in your discipleship arsenal as you're growing in your walk with the Lord. And so that's really our motivation. And we've been talking about the 7 deadly sins, and we are on number 5.
We're almost there.
We every episode we've been talking about how these particular sins, how they've been categorized, comes from church history, and which is an interpretation of Paul's list in Galatians, and so it's certainly not the only 7 sins. But as we've been unpacking them, it's pretty clear that they're a pretty good umbrella
I think so.
of a lot of our behavior, and I think it's important to talk about these because they affect everybody, regardless of where you are in your walk with the Lord. Since we are all have a propensity for sin. And you may be thinking, you know what, I really am looking for a lighthearted, entertaining podcast. Click on this one and they're talking about sin.
No.
Well,
We also are still a little entertaining, so hang in there. So you get a little
yeah,
bit of both.
just give us a shot. Give us a shot. I think we need to talk about these things because they impact our life, and so I want to open up our conversation and talk about greed. There's a famous line from a 1980s movie called Wall Street. Are you familiar with it?
Never seen it, but I do know what it is.
Michael Douglas plays the character Gordon Greco, and he says in a board meeting, he says, "Greed is good," is what he said, and really famous line, and kind of the epitome of the 1980s prosperity and Wall Street boom, and
Right.
things are really good in the U.S. economy and that type of thing, and I have to argue with that character's take on greed. Greed is not good.
From their perspective, it is, because greed means more money in business. So from their perspective, yes. But for ours, no. And in the human condition, no.
Greed is the love of money that leads to inordinate desire for and pursuit of material wealth. This series we're walking through is an adaptation of a leadership teaching by Stephen Blandino, and that is his note, that greed is the love of money. And I think it's a really good definition. Greed is the love of money that leads to an inordinate desire for and the pursuit of material wealth. I mean, I think the most of the context of our conversation is going to be around money, material wealth, and things like that, though I don't think that greed is limited to just that.
That's kind of where my brain was going to. I was thinking it can be all.
We can be greedy with lots of things.
Yeah. Be greedy with your time.
Yeah.
All kinds of stuff.
But for the most part, greed, by its use of the word, is typically attached to that. And this is what he warned Timothy in his letter, 1 Timothy 6:9, he said, "Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs." And you notice Paul, he uses 4 words to get to the desire that people have in their lives for money. He says want, desires, love, and eager. And I want to, we can preface that money is not a bad thing. Would you agree with that?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, as far as like humans and living in the world, it's kind of a necessity to survive as far as survival is concerned.
I'd go further. It is a necessity because that's all that's what we have. I mean, that's
Right.
the system, the economic system that we're in. We don't barter anymore for goods and services. We trade
Right.
currency.
Well, and I think God understands that. I mean, even to go even further back in Scripture where it says, "Give Caesar what is Caesar's."
Yeah.
I mean, that's pulling out of context, obviously, but still, that was what he was meaning.
Money is a.
Like there are still things that you need money for.
You can't get around that, can you?
Right.
Do you have a car payment?
I do.
Okay. So you're financing a car now. So have you ever attempted to send the finance company like a letter saying, "I promise to pay you some other time"?
No, it
No, you
doesn't
haven't.
work like
Do you know what they would say if you did?
No.
They would say, "Turn in the keys."
Right. It's like no thanks.
You can't you can't pay your car payment in chocolate. You can't pay it in well wishes.
Hopes and
You can't
dreams.
pay it in a bucket of buttons. It has to be money. So
Can't barter for a car anymore.
no. So whatever your thoughts of it is, you got to have money. And Paul's saying money's not the problem. Money is never the issue with greed. Money is not the issue. It's our healthy or unhealthy relationship with it. And so Paul's talking about something really prevalent that we all deal with or can deal with from time to time is an unhealthy relationship with money. Whether it's I need to get more to make me happy, or I need to keep all that I can to make me happy. It will ultimately make me happy, though I'm really living in with a spirit of fear and lack. And then the other side is I need to get as much as I can because the accumulation of wealth and stuff fills a hole in my life. And there's several. Greed's a spectrum, and being greedy, I think is a symptom of a heart condition, like you said. And so it's a selfish drive to pursue, to acquire, to fall in love with material things. And so the real fruit of the love of money isn't more stuff, but it's really all kinds of evil. Because when you want to get more stuff, then that is a indication of where your heart is and what makes you happy, essentially.
Trying to feel something.
Absolutely. And it kind of goes back to last time we talked about, envy and contentment,
I was thinking that.
and greed is part of that. I think greed can drive a lot of our envy for stuff or what other people have because we want it ourselves.
I think greed can also be generational too. So we kind of talked about this last week. I think all of these things can be generational, but like
For sure, because you learn it somewhere.
Yeah, and you also obviously have a opportunity to stop that at every generation in your family line. You have a choice to stop it, but unfortunately, it's just there. So you go back, like last week we were talking about, like even more so, like the Great Depression
Right,
generation.
right.
So they did not have it. They had no money. You're probably your more poverty-stricken generation of people who are now older adults. But then their children want to do more and overly do more, and that's where you end up with workaholism because their parents didn't have it, and so they probably didn't have it as kids, and so they're overcompensating because they didn't have it. So now I'm afraid to lose it.
So it's driving that fear of loss, or a reaction to my parents' or grandparents' relationship with money is
Yeah.
driving the greed that I may have.
I think so.
I think that makes a lot of sense. But also too, if you look, let's think about this. Let's say you had a grandmother or great grandmother now who grew up in the Great Depression or was alive during the Great Depression. And because of what they experienced, they hang on to things.
The hoarding
The
tendencies.
hoarding tendencies, they're washing aluminum foil,
Right,
or
yeah.
or they're saving bacon grease, because they may not have. And those aren't bad things. Those aren't, being a good steward and being frugal is a great virtues to
But there's
have.
extremes, though.
I think the extremes of that is a form of
I think
greediness.
so. I think
I'm
is,
so,
yeah.
Almost to the point where I can't let this go. Maybe not even share it, because if I share it, I won't have it. And I think greed is not always the picture of the Gordon Gekko where he's riding in a Ferrari and sleeping in a pile of money. I don't think it's
Yeah.
always like that. I think there's a greed has
I think you can be
polar.
poor and
Yes.
be greedy.
Yes.
I think it's a whole spectrum.
I think I want to talk about that because I think there's a lot of I think you're absolutely right. I think a lot of us are poor because we're greedy, because we don't give and we don't share and we don't sow. So let's talk about that. I think there is a temptation because of our need for stuff, our desire for stuff, our love of stuff.
Yeah.
We can become greedy for things, and maybe even as leadership, we can become greedy for perks or privilege or power or position or, I want to talk about how can we counter these temptations. There's times in my life where I'm like, well, I had the greatest guardrails that you could have. I just didn't have the money,
Yeah.
to buy the
Yeah.
stuff or to invest the stuff, so I had a guardrail, but it again was my heart condition, so I think to help us counter greed in our life, I think one of the first things, and you just tell me if you agree with me or disagree with me. Maybe you might agree or disagree with some of these things in the comments. We want to encourage you to do that. Thank you for
Right.
commenting on our YouTube channel. I think one of the things that we need to be is responsible with our money. Yeah. And I know some of you are like, quit meddling in my business. Being responsible with it, in that we're, there's a thing. And Bethany and I talk about shopping a lot,
Me too.
and we both have an affinity for cool stuff and fashion and shoes and stuff like that. And I'm learning this, have learned this. And my wife, if she was here, she would, this would be, I would include her in this statement too, is just because it's on sale doesn't mean we have to buy it.
I know. I've gotten better, but that's always been a tough thing for me, honestly. Like, if I can buy something not at full price and it's still really, really good quality stuff, yeah. But I've had to tell myself lately not to do
What
that.
do you think about this kind of new slang cultural idea of girl math? We've talked about that.
I think about girl math all the time.
Because girl math to me, the way I'm understanding it is, it's like, well, if I get it on sale, then I'm saving money.
Yeah.
So if I don't do it, then I'd be losing money.
Exactly.
Which that's not.
It's like when
that's not true though, right? That's like not real.
I'm a big thrifter, and so I will go to Goodwill or any vintage store or wherever, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm getting a great deal because this pair of pants that I picked out are like $15. Thank you, Goodwill inflation. They used to not be $15. Sometimes you can find some jeans for $15, and I look them up. I always Google everything I buy, see what it's actually worth, and I found some that they're $200 jeans, and so. Like, great, okay. And then eventually, that $200 that I'm technically saving in girl math doesn't get saved at all because then I keep finding more $15 pairs of jeans.
But in your mind, you're thinking, I'm ahead.
Right.
Because I found a $200 pair of jeans.
For $15.
Now, let me ask you something. If you were to say, hey, I spent $200 at Goodwill.
Yeah.
You would think, that's crazy. And why would you do that? So...
But on the other hand, people will go and say, hey, I bought these $200 pants, and I think that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, you can justify it. That's fine. But
oh, girl math it doesn't work.
But
I do it, but it doesn't work.
Yeah, I get it. It helps us justify our spending. I'm not saying those aren't good deals, but the point is, I guess the point of that is, is it something, regardless of how much it is, regardless if it's $15 or $200, is it something we need right now? Now, you have to answer that. You have to answer that. Maybe it is. Cool, no problem. I just think that the responsible spending has to go through that thought process, and maybe you create a budget, and part of your budget is clothes or shopping or whatever, and that's within that, and you can comfortably do that. I don't think there's any problem with that. I don't think there's any issue with that at all. Yeah. I'm just saying, in order to battle the temptation of greed, we have to have these guardrails in our life.
Yeah. I honestly super glad about the place that I'm in with it because I've always had, and I acknowledge this, and I think I've talked about it on the podcast months and months ago. I've always had an interesting relationship with clothes. Like, I've always loved it. Wanted to be a fashion designer when I was like 6 years old, that kind of thing. But always loved like the newest trends and whatever. And like seeing the value in buying quality clothes. Yeah. Not buying into fast fashion a shirt that's gonna fall apart in 2 weeks.
Sure. Sure.
But lately, I've just found myself looking at stuff and thinking, okay, do I actually need this, or do I just like the dopamine it creates because I'm getting a good deal on something?
Yes.
Do I actually need it, or am I just trying to like fuel brain chemicals? And making that decision has really saved me a lot of money, especially like this year. Like 2025 has been my year of I'm not buying as much. I'm not buying as much from like over consuming stuff.
It's good.
And
do I need it?
Yeah. I had this ordeal. I gutted like half of my closet last year because I just felt convicted. Yeah. I looked at my closet and got sick. And it's just like I was just gotta go. And so I always have to kind of keep myself in check.
Oh well, you have to create the guardrail of that. I and maybe you're like me. I grew up in a house of spenders. Mm-hmm. My mom and my dad were spenders. They weren't savers. And that's, and we didn't have a lot. Yeah, that's the dangerous thing. It's like they didn't have much, and what they didn't have, they spent, So, but I saw that, and Addie grew up in a similar household where there was it was buying stuff was kind of a love language that we kind of grew up in, and so.
And see, I always grew up like we were finding good deals. And whether the girl math was adding up, I don't know. But I always loved a good deal even from a kid, but then I'm buying a ton of stuff at a good deal.
I think the dopamine pursuit is a real thing.
That could be a podcast by itself.
It could be. I think living within your means and making a budget is going to be the best way to operate with that, because if you've budgeted X amount of dollars and it fits and you have the, you're responsible with it, and whatever you budget for, thrifting or clothes or fishing or hunting or golf or whatever it is that makes you happy, in those terms.
Right.
And they don't really make you happy. But they are these enjoyable pleasures of life.
Yeah.
We don't need to deny ourselves of that. But if you've already budgeted for it, then go crazy within that,
But then once you hit that,
then
that's
it's
it.
over.
That's it.
And
That's all I get.
and so I think responsibility is key. I think another aspect of of countering the temptation of greed is accountability. Okay. So I think if you're married, then your spouse is your accountability partner on that. If you're not married, you have a family member, a good friend, the person that you trust and share that type of stuff with. Have them. You need a buddy to go, do you need that?
Right.
Do you really need to do that?
Yeah,
You don't need an accomplice.
Right. I'm the opposite. I'm not the person you take shopping.
Yeah.
Because I'm gonna be like, yeah, that's a great deal. Go for it. It looks great on you.
You need somebody that can
Yeah.
help with accountability. I think
someone to tell me that.
I think spouses are, it's the same situation. There have been seasons in our life where Addie and I we were each other's accomplice. Man, we were just like, should we do that? Yeah, we should do
sure.
that. Hey, we just went to the grocery store, but I don't feel like cooking. Should we go out to eat? Yeah, let's do that.
Let's do it.
So I think you've got to have you got to have some accountability in your life with these things, and someone to help you keep that in check, so that you're healthy with your spending, but also have a healthy view of money. Yeah, we got to have money, and money is good, and money takes care of the things that we need and the things that we want. But I can't be in love with it.
Right.
I can't be in love with it. I can't be in love with the things that it does. And so, responsibility, accountability. And then I think we, especially as believers, 100% as believers, we need to practice habits of generosity. And that's really hard when you're greedy.
Yeah.
Because greedy is an expression of selfishness.
I think so.
And ultimately, because I want to accumulate to
Just in case, what if something happens?
whatever.
and
It's
blah,
either
blah, blah.
or it's mine.
I worked hard for it.
Absolutely not sharing, or I may not have it. Scarcity,
This
or
is all I've got.
absolutely. But I think that generosity is such a way to combat that, because especially if we're working, this is another thing, if we're working within the confines of budgeting and being responsible with our money, we're not overspending, then we hopefully at that point we're managing our money as best we can. We've got some margin, even a little bit of margin.
Yeah.
And with that margin, out of that margin, we can be generous. And I think when we live above our means and we're irresponsible with our money, and I've been that way many seasons in our life, but we don't have the opportunity. We see an opportunity for generosity, and we're like, well, I just don't have it.
Can't do it. Yeah.
And I can't give if I don't have it. And so, but here's what generosity does. Generosity keeps greed from controlling our heart. Because when you do give, and here's another. Let me put some pastoral. Let me slap some pastoral on there. Is generosity is not tithing.
Right.
Okay, we are not being generous when we tithe. The tithe belongs to God.
Right.
Okay.
It's already
So
his.
we're not being generous, but that's like me saying, "Hey, can I have $10? Can I borrow $10 from you, Bethany?" And you say, "Sure," and then I give you your $10 back and say, what a good friend I am. How generous am I for giving you
giving you
$10. Now you're like, wait a
$10.
minute, you owe that to me.
Yeah.
So that's the tithe. So that belongs to the Lord. So it's above that tithe is being generous. So let me clarify that too. I don't know. I hope I don't offend your theology on that, but that's the reality
Right.
of the tithe and generous. So anything beyond the tithe, giving is generous, whether that's at your church, that's at another ministry, or it's taking care of some a community need or whatever.
Yeah.
It's beyond that. But I think that said, not only the tithe, but on top of that, being generous with the money that God's given to you and being able to sow those those benefits will keep us humble. It'll keep us. It'll guard our heart. It'll keep greed from controlling us, because usually greed starts small and it grows like an appetite. And I think if we can keep up with these guardrails in our life, man, we're gonna be so much better off. And giving is such an amazing. It's hard to explain. Giving is such a crazy thing that God has orchestrated, where you give something to someone that they need it or it benefits their life in some way. So you bless them, right? But then there's this crazy sense of satisfaction and fulfillment that you get, even though you have less than what you had before, right? But yet there's this gift that generosity gives. And that's
And then in turn, you're taken care of, even though that's not why we do it. But it's also scripture. I mean, given it shall be given to you. But that's not why you give, obviously.
No.
But giving out of the right place and giving out of a generous place.
Yes.
God sees that, and it also sees giving when you don't have it.
That's good.
And so, like, he sees that person who is, it may not be out of a greedy heart, but he sees you're small. He sees the small, and he sees your heart when giving to people.
That's good. That's good.
And so I think you reap the benefits from that.
I think when you give out of obligation, you miss what you give. Like I think when you give out of obligation, you're dealing with addition and subtraction. And when you give from a generous heart, it's multiplication. Yeah. Like, and you don't miss what you do. In fact, you quoted that from the gospel, given it will be given to you, pressed down, shaken, running over. I can't think of it. That's Mark 6:38. You'll have to. I don't have my Bible handy, but it's actually true. Give and it will be given to you, basically in equal then greater measure. So whatever you give, and if you give a little, if you give a lot, it's exponential, and that is strictly by the sovereignty and goodness of God that He does that. And I don't think in any other area, in any outside of the graciousness and sovereignty and mercy of God. Yeah, I think giving is from the right place, the right heart, the right mindset. I think having the resources to be able to give allows us a freedom in giving. We can give without fear. Yeah. But even still, I think giving with a right heart and a generous heart is you can't go wrong with that. So so again, how we're going to protect ourselves from greed? We're going to be responsible. We're going to be accountable, and we're going to be generous. Amen.
Amen.
You got anything else to add?
No, I think we got it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. I can't wait. We cannot wait to connect with you next time, next week. Again, if you're looking for a church home, I cannot recommend New Life Assembly of God highly enough. And so join us Sundays, 9:30 for connect groups and 11 o'clock for a worship service. You can join us online right here. YouTube Live. Have an awesome day.
Join us next week on The Rundown.